Hi, everybody, and welcome to 5 and 15, a webinar series from C.O.nxt, where we promise to bring you 5 interesting, we hope useful, insightful bits of information that you can use in your work in marketing and communication, all within the constraints of a 15-minute webinar, because we know you are busy. I'm Mark Gale, now Chief Growth Officer at our 100% employee-owned ESOP. Everybody has a little extra passion and purpose here to do well for our clients because, ultimately they benefit when you benefit. Our areas of expertise, strategic marketing and communications, really brand building, promoting, defending brand more important than ever. And where do we do that? Across the food system. Literally clients in ag and food that go from organisms growing in the soil, microorganisms, to biome, to food that all of us are going to eat wherever we're going to get it today. I'm really excited to have someone I've known for a long time today, Rob Neenan from California League of Food Producers. Goes back at least 10 or a dozen years to your days at United Fresh Produce, Rob. But you are in the thick of agriculture, organizations producing food in California, a pivotal state that has a lot of impact. And so Rob has agreed to come on and talk with us a little bit about some of the things happening in California, which fundamentally spill over into the rest of the nation as food and policy and many other ways. Rob, just yesterday, you may have seen it, I was reading a story about this idea of water banking in Nebraska, I believe it was. So it's not just California that has water issues, it's all of us. So Rob, why don't you tell us a little bit about your organization and yourself, and then we'll jump right into it because we like to keep close to the time and allow people to get back to their work.
Thank you, Mark. California League of Food Producers was formed in 1905. We're a statewide trade association. Our members are fruit and vegetable processors, also nuts, dairy, snack food. Our focus is on government affairs. We handle mostly just statewide issues, regulatory and legislative, and that keeps us pretty busy. As for myself, I grew up on a dairy farm in New York State and went to Cornell for ag economics, and then I got a master's at Fresno State in ag business. So I've been around food and ag my whole life.
Okay, dairy farm. Then you've really got it bracketed. East Coast dairy to fresh fruit and produce, and well, a lot of dairy in California too. Yeah. We still make more cheese, by the way, and better cheese in Wisconsin. So I just want to get that in. But let's get to an issue, a tough issue, Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. Rob, tell us a little bit about that and what kind of impact that's having on agriculture and crops.
Yes. Prior to 2014, groundwater use by farmers or residential homeowners was relatively unregulated. If you could drill a well and pull water up, it was yours to use. You didn't really have to report how much you used or how you used it. But that was not a situation that was sustainable long-term. We now have nearly 40 million residents in California, a huge agricultural sector, and groundwater use kept increasing, especially in periods of drought. When farmers couldn't get surface water, they would replace it with groundwater, and some farmers rely entirely on groundwater. So there's a lot of competition for the water, and a lot of the groundwater basins, so much water was withdrawn out of those basins, and some of that water had been there thousands of years, and it wasn't getting replaced by recharge, that some of the groundwater basins saw subsidence. They literally, the ground soil surface or subsurface collapsing. And you may have seen pictures of that. In some cases, in recent years, 2 or 3 feet collapsing. And that has a lot of impact also on the infrastructure, on roads and on canals. And so in 2014, the State Water Board recognized they had to address this issue long term and enacted the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA. And it's a lengthy regulation, but I can boil it down to just a few things. The State Water Board is tasking local management agencies to form and develop long-term plans, by long-term 20, 30, 40-year plans, to try to bring these groundwater basins, each one of them, back into what they call a sustainable yield, such that the amount of groundwater being taken out in a year doesn't exceed the amount of recharge going on, which obviously is a huge task.
Yeah, and now I know I believe it's 2040 that's supposed to what is it, stop depleting or come back. And I'm gonna, while you're telling that, I'm gonna bring up a map that just shows how widespread this is, the areas affected.
While you're bringing it up, yes, it's almost the entire Central Valley of California where the problems are most acute. There's certainly other areas. And it's principally, yeah, the light brown areas, particularly if you look at that light brown area, it's the southern part of the area where it's most acute. We get a lot of snow in the northern part of California that is a source of a huge amount of our water supply in the state, not only for agriculture, but for everybody. And so the northern part of the state tends to be a less critical in water, but the number of basins, and it's hard to tell from that particular map, I'm having trouble reading the legend, but some of those basins are identified as being, you know, sort of an acute situation, a critical situation, and they have to act first. They're required to really move forward with some early action on water, dealing with these water plans and developing something by 2040, although some environmental groups are arguing that it should be pushed up to 2030 because we're going into another drought, which is going to put more pressure on groundwater supplies.
Right, and I'll stop the share here. And really the point for me was, if you know what's over here on the right, and it's down here on the lower right, you're talking about most of the core areas of California, to me, is the point of this map. And I did read a couple notes on that. There, if you break it into small basins, there are 515 small ones, and then you got now California, second year of a drought, right? So we had some replenishment, and then so this is not going away soon.
Yeah, there's been a lot of reports lately that just we've had no rain for some time, and even though the water behind the dams, the supply is not bad because of a couple of decent years we had. It can be depleted quickly, and there isn't much of a snowpack. The snowpack is like 50% of normal. So we're heading in apparently another drought, which could last a year, could last multiple years. And as I said, that puts a lot of pressure on groundwater. And maybe I can take
crops starting to shift? Are crops starting to shift? What people are growing? Is there become, you know, it seems as though in some of those areas where there's a lot of irrigation and such, there, you know, at a certain point, you'd have to start reconsidering what you're growing where, perhaps.
Yeah, there's 4 ways principally that these local management agencies are going to try to address this issue and develop long-term plans. One is conservation, both for, you know, farmers, but also for urban residents, for manufacturing plants, food processors. There's going to be a lot of pressure and probably more regulation going forward on conservation. But for farmers, it's really 3 things. One is recharge. Many winters, not this year, we get a lot of rain in the winter and early spring that just goes out to the ocean. And being able to direct that to farms and flood farms where that will recharge the groundwater is an area what they're looking at. But you have to have the rain to be able to do it. The second thing they're looking at is water trading. We already do some water trading in the state with surface water. They're trying to develop a system of groundwater. There's logistical issues, infrastructure issues. And I think that's it's still to be determined how well that'll work, because years like this, everybody wants water. So in most years, the demand for it's going to exceed the supply. And that'll be a challenge for the markets. But really the main way, particularly in Kern County and Kings County and in the south part of the valley, that they're going to deal with this is to fallow farmland. The estimates I've seen—
Fallow the farmland?
Fallow the farmland. Between 500,000 and 1 million acres of farmland may be fallowed. I tend to think it's going to be on the high side. That would be 4% of all the cropland in California to be taken out of production. And you know, they're talking about putting into solar power, other things. So that's
okay. So it's permanently coming out of production.
Yeah, farmers are going to have to make decisions. Yeah, farmers are going to have to make decisions about how they're going to use their water and what crops. And so getting to your question, I think there are going to be winners and losers. It's a little early to tell, but I think the consensus at this point seems to be that a lot of the permanent crops, the nut crops, almonds, walnuts, pistachios, as well as wine grapes, will do well, partly because the return on those crops has traditionally been higher, but also, and this has nothing to do with water, they can all be mechanically harvested. And the losers might be, I mean, the dairy sector in California is the #1 producer of dairy products. Sorry, Wisconsin.
I know.
But that may change because the dairy sector has been struggling in California. And of course, that means the forage crops, which require a lot of water, they're going to be affected by this. So there'll be sort of a circular impact on that. And there's other crops like cotton, which used to be a big part of production in California, which has been declining. And we grow 240 commercial crops in California. So we'd be here a long time trying to sort through which ones might make it. But it's really going to boil down to every farmer is going to have to look how much water he has and how to maximize the dollar he can make out of the land he has and the crops that he might be able to grow with the soil that he has.
Okay, so it's going to make, as if farming isn't hard enough, it's going to make it, the other factors are going to make it harder. And I know, and we won't spend as much time talking about this, but then there's the Central Valley Salts Program, also a groundwater quality issue, salt and nitrates in the water as well, exacerbating this whole situation. Is that because contaminated, is that water then not as usable for crops and for human consumption? Is that the issue there?
It depends, and it's not enough that we have a water supply issue, but also in some of the same areas we have a water quality issue. And there's been a lot of research, and basically years and years of farming and maybe nutrient management that wasn't what it should have been has resulted in significant areas of the South Valley of the state and other areas having nitrate levels that are not at the safe human level. And I'll get back to the salt issue in a moment, focusing on the nitrate, which is the most immediate. There are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of private wells in California where they can't use the water coming out of the wells for drinking purposes. And some community water systems, particularly in some rural poor areas where they have the same problem. They don't have the money to fix the problem. And so the State Water Board, and I read recently that there may be 900,000 people in Central California who have drinking water that isn't usable for any one of a number of reasons, including nitrate. So the State Water Board has enacted a new set of regulations. I'll kind of skip over the 1,000 pages of detail. And it boils down to this: they're going to require, similar to SGMA, that local management agencies be formed to deal with this, and it be funded by the farmers, the food processors, the wineries, the public treatment works. And it's really, again, I'm oversimplifying, a 3-stage process, and it's already starting in some areas. The first stage will take about 5 years, is that these management agencies will have to test the groundwater for anybody that wants it tested. And if it exceeds the nitrate levels, they're going to have to give those people a replacement water supply. It can be bottled water, water stations. Everybody wants it is going to get it. And that alone is going to be a monumental task when you're talking in somebody's management zone, hundreds of homes spread over rural areas for miles. But that's just the first 5 years roughly. The next 5 to 10 years, they have to make, they being the management zones, have to make all these people whole. That is, they either have to drill them a new well or drop pipeline to hook them up to a local public treatment works, or I'm sorry, a public water system, to give them a quality water supply. And you could imagine the cost of that, because many of these homes are out in rural areas near dairy farms, and drilling them all deep wells at a time when groundwater is at a premium, or putting in pipes. And that's just the first 2 phases. The long term is, this is just to give regulatory relief to the farmers. So the long term, they have to bring their discharges into compliance, that the water running off farms will have to meet these nitrate standards, which means radical changes in fertilizer use, manure use, cover crop management for agriculture. This is a 40 or 50 year project that's going to be immensely expensive.
Wow, yeah, it sounds expensive, but also maybe as difficult that is just the complexity of enacting that, and logistics of all of it have to be extremely difficult in order to implement something like that. Yeah, amazing.
They're real community issues. If to be fair, if I owned a home where the water coming out of my well was not safe for kids to drink or me to drink, my home is basically worthless, and who's
Yeah.
going to buy it? And so
Mhm.
there's a lot of groups representing homeowners that expect to be made whole in this, and the state is going to make sure they get made whole. So it isn't just simply that the farmers in these management zones are going to do what they want to do. The communities are going to have a lot of say in terms of how it is done.
Yeah, big fundamental impacts here. So now, if that wasn't hard enough for your members and for agriculture, and honestly for the food all of us eat, because we all of us are getting part of some of our food from California, certainly, and we're all interconnected. So we might think that I'm 1,000 miles away, but that doesn't mean I don't have a finger in that pie in terms of impact at any rate. So I know that another thing that you and I have talked about is technology and labor. And you brought up something in a conversation that I thought was interesting. I mean, I kind of thought about this, and actually, in all industries are facing, the Facebook factor of people getting jobs at Facebook or Google or whatever. But technical workers, the Tesla factor of, as farming gets ever more sophisticated, and it is a very sophisticated business now, the competition for workers is coming from unexpected places. It's not just people, it's people with deep skill.
Yeah, there really is a race on here, and it's probably true in your part of the world, for farmers and food processors to mechanize everything they can mechanize. And unfortunately, a lot of the crops grown here, like citrus, table grapes, there is no mechanical harvesting yet. Strawberries, they've been working on a robotic harvester, but they're not quite there yet. And our members, the food processors, are automating, putting a lot of high technology. And the good news is you're going to reduce your kind of front end labor cost, as it were. The challenge is finding the people who can maintain these machines, operate them, optimize them. And just speaking for food processors, finding the talent to do that is a real challenge. There's a nationwide shortage of maintenance mechanics, electricians, and there's a new discipline that I've recently learned about called Mechatronics. There's only a few community colleges and four-year schools in the US that offer this as a degree. It's a hybrid between engineering, computer science, and automation. And those graduates are a big demand. My understanding is even if you have just like a 2-year degree in mechatronics, you can start easily at 80,000 anywhere you want in the country, and some of them are making 6 figures right out of the gate. Because you really need these people to there's no sense having all this technology and not be able to really use it optimally. And so I think that to your point about competition, whether it's somebody with a mechatronics degree or just an electrician, they're competing with Tesla and other plants that are paying more or maybe located in something more excited than a rural community. And if my members are struggling to get those people, as farmers adapt more technology, they're going to be competing with my members and stealing employees from each other. And I think this is kind of a challenge that isn't enough being paid attention to. We're working with some community colleges on this, but I think this is going to be something that all of ag and food are going to have to pay attention to.
Yeah, it's I got to tell you, one of the reasons and I'm sure you're the same, one of the reasons I love working in this space is that technology is becoming front and center more than ever. It's changing quickly, and there's the challenge of solving some difficult problems, which can bring frustration, but it also can be rewarding to be part of that whole industry. Well, we're coming up on time here. Apologies if I brought up the doom and gloom, the difficulties, but I think it's really important for people in a broader sense. We hear about water in California, but what you're doing is you're giving us some understanding of what it means and what some of the the issues are and why it's expensive and why it's complicated. So maybe finish up here, Rob, with telling us, give us a little bit of a positive spin from your members, what they're doing, what they're looking for, what what are they optimistic about, and where are things going in a positive way in California? Because despite these problems, California is going to be have a big impact for a very long time on food and agriculture. So, give us some bright spots.
I think the one thing that's not changing is we have a Mediterranean climate. We have some of the best soils in the world. The yields on products here in California, the average yield per acre for processing tomatoes approaches 50 tons an acre. And many other crops, they just can't grow the quality and quantity in other places in the world that we can grow here. And things like almonds and pistachios really aren't grown in any significant amount anywhere else in the US. So we've got some comparative advantage on some crops and on weather and soils, but we have regulatory challenges. And I think the reason why I've stayed in the food and ag business my whole life is that there's always challenges, but it's an exciting industry that's always changing. 5 years ago, who knew about quinoa? Now it's in every product you buy. But who buys canned spinach anymore? Popeyes left the building, so things are always changing, and I think our members are doing their best to stay ahead of it. And our job as an association is to try to help them comply and deal with these regulatory challenges, but we'll get through it. And I think we've got enough advantages that there will be some winners and losers, but I think in the long run, California agriculture is here to stay.
Yeah, well, suffice it to say, your job prospects are good. They're going to be problems to solve, and it is fascinating. And what you bring up with the soil and the climate, yeah, you can't replace that. That is something. So then it's a matter of finding the solution to be able to continue to do it in a different way. And I just recently saw, by the way, a company out of Israel where there's a lot of ag innovation has a automated almond pollinating machine, which I'm sure it's prototype, but it's just another example of the evolution, the fascinating evolution of where things are going. So more to come. Well, Rob, thank you so much. Best of luck with all that for you and for all the members of California League of Food Producers and anybody associated with agriculture. As I said, we're all connected to that. So we really appreciate you giving us a little bit more in-depth look today. And everybody else, thanks for logging into this and listening. I'm Mark Gale, Chief Growth Officer, C.O.nxt. Thanks for joining us, and watch for our next 5 and 15. And everybody, wish you well as we come up to summer here. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.